Everybody knows that TFT players can't read, so I decided to make this video. This is every new unit and trait in set 14 of TFT. Our first one-cost unit, Alistar, he's a bruiser golden ox. Get it? Cause he's literally a golden ox. His passive reduces all damage by a flat amount, and his active deals magic damage and stuns them for 2 seconds, which is a really long time. You're definitely going to want to position your Alistar in front of the enemy tank or their melee carry. Dr. Mundo, a bruiser street demon slayer, he gains 30% more HP from everything, and he's a bruiser unit, so he's going to have infinite HP, and his ability heals him and deals bonus damage, both of which scale from his HP. Not much to say about Dr. Mundo, but I did see him one-shot a unit during the playtest, so you might want to play around with that. Jax is a Bastion Exotech unit. His ability gives him a shield and he deals damage around him. And even though it doesn't say this in the tooltip, if the unit is far away when he casts, he will jump to them instead of walking. Kindred is a Nitro rapid fire unit. Her ability deals a ton of damage to the current unit, and if she kills them, the overkill damage bounces to another unit. Kog'Maw is a Boombot rapid fire. His ability is straight up his W from League. He gains attack speed and his attacks do more damage. Morgana is a Divina Core Dynamo, and she shoots 2 orbs that deal damage over time. Nidalee is a Nitro AMP unit that deals damage to her target and amp nearest enemies, and she heals for each enemy hit. We'll talk more about the amp trait later, but basically amp units scale with the number of amp units that you play. So at 0 amp, you'll hit the 2 nearest units, and at max, you can hit the nearest 6. Poppy is the Cyber Boss Bastion that throws her shield at the furthest enemy, and then she gains a shield. And if she's the Cyber Boss, her ability will do even more damage, scaling off of her armor and her AP. This Poppy is a straight up reprint of the Poppy in set 8, but I do remember a patch where you could play 6 Bastion Poppy with 3 Brambles, and she would one-shot the carry every single time. Seraphine is an Anima Squad techie, and she's another reprint. She fires a wave that pierces through enemies. Shaco is a Syndicate Slayer unit, and his ability is actually really cool. His passive gives him permanent AD for every unit he kills, and his ability just deals bonus damage. If you give him the Syndicate bonus, which we'll talk about later, he's going to TP behind the lowest health enemy instead of his current target on cast. I don't know if this number is going to get changed. It seems like a lot to me, but I did have a game where I had 4-star Shaco with like 600 AD and he was pretty much worthless, so yeah, I don't know. Silas is a Vanguard Anima Squad. He gains HP and deals damage. That's it. Vi is also a Vanguard, and she also has Cypher. She gains a shield and also does damage. Man, these one-cost Vanguards are really boring. And our last one-cost, Zyra, she's a street demon techie that throws a vine and it splits into another after hitting. So yeah, it's almost an exact reprint of the Zyra we had last set. On to the 2 costs. First, we got Darius, who's a Syndicate Bruiser. His ability is another reprint of the Darius we had from last set. He spins and he heals, but this ability also sunders, and if you give him a hat, the range of his spin increases and he heals per enemy hit. Echo is a Street Demon Strategist. He heals himself and he deals damage. It's pretty much his E from League. And from what I've seen in the playtest, Echo 3 is an unkillable Demon King that does infinite damage, so definitely try him out in the PvE. Graves, a Golden Ox Executioner. He has no mana. Instead, every 2 autos, he dashes and fires 2 shots really quickly. And I didn't play Graves a ton during the playtest, but I really want to know if Ginsu's is good on him, so if you try him out in the PvE, be sure to let me know in the comments. Alawi is an Anima Squad Bastion that heals herself, then deals AoE damage and reduces their MR. Jin is an Exotech Marksman Dynamo. His ability is his Q from League. The beanbag bounces 4 times, it sunders, and the last bounce always hits the first target. LeBlanc is a Cypher Strategist, and although she doesn't permanently scale, she scales within the round. Every time you cast, you fire another sigil, and I've seen LeBlanc just one-shot entire teams at the end of the fight. If you get the chance, definitely take Blue Battery, and I would reroll LeBlanc with Echo. Nefiri is an Exotech AMP unit, and her passive grants her Omnivamp. When she casts, she summons packmates that do small damage and AMP scaling alphas that do more damage. Shit, Nefiri must be summoning me then. Oh! This set, instead of Kayn, we have his alter ego, Rost. He's a Divina Core Vanguard. His ability knocks a target into the air for a really long time. He heals, and then he does a bunch of damage to him. This is another unit you want in front of their main tank or their melee carry. Shyvana is a Nitro Bastion techie. On her first cast, she'll heal HP every second and deal AoE damage, and every cast after, she gains 200 HP and damage amp. Skarner is a Boombot Vanguard, and his ability is just so confusing to read. Gain a shield for 3 seconds and dredge up a missile, and when the shield ends, hurl the missile at the group of the most enemies within 2 hexes, dealing magic damage to the centermost enemy and 50% of the damage to enemies adjacent to them. That's a lot of words for saying gain a shield and deal AoE damage. I mean, isn't this one kind of confusing? Twisted Fate is a Syndicate rapid fire unit, and his passive gives him 3 AP every auto. His ability throws 2 cards, and if you give him the hat, your card can turn into a blue, yellow, or a red card. The red card does AoE damage, the blue card does true damage, and the yellow card gives you gold. Vayne, an Anima Squad Slayer, her ability rapidly fires 3 attacks that all do bonus true damage. Finally, Veigar, a Cyber Boss techie, he deals magic damage. If Veigar is the same star level as the target, you deal 20% true damage, and if Veigar is a higher star level, you deal 33% true damage. And if he's the big boss man, he just deals more damage. On to the 3 costs. First, we have Braum, a Syndicate Vanguard, who's legit a reprint of Loris from last set. Braum gains a shield and he chills the 3 closest enemies whenever it breaks. If you give him a hat, you gain armor and MR, and every few seconds you deal a ton of damage. Draven, a rapid fire Cypher unit, he just throws his ult across the stage and he deals less damage per unit hit. Elise, a Nitro Dynamo unit, her ability goes Gundam mode, she blasts 3 targets and she also reduces their MR. Fiddlesticks is a Boombot techie, and although I can read what his ability does, I've never actually seen anybody play Fiddlesticks in the playtest. I think he's gonna be a drain tank because he tethers, he deals damage, and he heals himself, but I'm honestly not sure. What I am sure about is Galio, a Cypher Bastion unit. He's definitely a tank. His ability gives him durability. After the durability ends, he heals himself and he stuns the target that did the most amount of damage to Galio. If you position Galio in a corner in front of their enemy carry and he's able to walk 1 hex up, he'll always stun the enemy carry. Gragas is a Divinicore Bruiser and his ability is super simple. He heals himself and he does AoE damage. Really boring ability, but one great thing about Gragas is if you ever need to splash Bruiser in your comp, Gragas is the unit you should play every time. When you play Gragas, not only do you get Bruiser, but you also get an additional 55% HP from Divinicore. Jarvan, a Golden Ox Vanguard Slayer, and his ability is also super long. Basically, he deals damage, gets a shield, and reduces the armor of everyone he hits. Jinx is a Street Demon Marksman, and she's another round scaling unit. Her ability fires rockets at random units that deal bonus damage, and each cast increases the number of rockets. Mordekaiser is an Exotech Bruiser techie. His ability gives him a shield, he slams the current target and stuns everybody in a line. Rengar is a Street Demon Executioner, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be the most frustrating unit in the game to play against. Rengar pretty much just jumps on your backline units, one-shots them, and at every cast he jumps again and again and again and again. I only fought against reroll Rengar 1 time during the playtest, but that round was unplayable. Senna is a Divinicore Slayer, her attacks deal AoE damage and her cast is just a big beam. Varus is an Exotech Executioner that fires a bolt that stuns and AoEs onto the 3 closest units. And no, the AoE ability does not stun. I'm pretty sure that would be insanely broken. Yumi is an Anima Squad AMP strategist and her passive gives her mana every second that scales with the number of amp units you have. Her cast does damage and marks the target, and if the target is already marked, she does like triple damage. I have a feeling that most casual players are going to skip directly to this section, so if that's you, hello, please like, comment, and subscribe. Annie is a Golden Ox amp unit, and I'm pretty sure this is like the first time Annie hasn't been a tank. Her ability throws a fireball at the target that explodes into mini fireballs, and the amount of mini fireballs it explodes into scales with the number of amp units you have. Every 4 casts, instead of throwing a fireball, you throw Tibbers and it comes out as a mini tank that does damage. Aphelios is a Golden Ox marksman that fires a big blast at the largest group of enemies. Then you equip a number of chakrams that increase per unit hit, and you deal bonus damage per chakram. Brand, a Street Demon techie, he lobs paint at the largest clump of enemies that deals damage, and when it explodes, you deal damage to close units. Cho'Gath, another scaling unit, he's a Boombot Bruiser, and on cast, he gains HP, gets bigger, and he screams. And every time you cast, your scream gets bigger. Leona is an Anima Squad Vanguard, and her ability gives her durability, and she deals damage to the largest clump, stuns the center unit, and they all take bonus damage for the next few seconds. Misfortune is a Syndicate Dynamo, and her ability is her ult, and if she's wearing the hat, she fires more waves. I swear every time Misfortune is in a set, her ability is always the same, but it's a really cool ability, so I'm not gonna complain. Nico is a Street Demon strategist, and on cast, she gains a shield and creates zones that bounces 3 times. Every pop deals bonus damage, and the last pop chills enemies. Sejuani is the CC4 cost of the set, because every set needs a CC4 cost. She's an Exotech Bastion, her passive gives her more armor and MR from everything, and her ability stuns the entire board. Vex is a Divinicore Executioner, her passive gives her Omnivamp, and when she casts, she dashes to the furthest enemy within 3 hexes and explodes. Zaya, an Anima Squad Executioner, her ability shoots feathers at the enemy, and when they die, the feathers seek out more units. And I don't think the feathers permanently stack, so after the feathers hit the first unit, I don't think that they compound onto like a second and third unit. Zed is a Cypher Slayer, and in my opinion, he's the coolest unit in the entire set. I'm not gonna read over the ability because you really have to just see it to understand it, so yeah, just look at this. During this fight, I'm gonna spit some bars, so let me know if you like them. They try to ban me, but I'm getting that bread like a ban me. Shooting shots at your mom like you Bambi, and I be slinging that heat like I'm Panny. This is a bar I made for Zeri from last set, but I haven't figured out the rest of it. So my sniper's looking Zeri. Metal fire make you see lights. Da-na-na. Zeri is an Exotech rapid fire unit, and her ability summons a shadow clone that deals 50% of her damage and she dashes. This unit is also super satisfying to play, and yes, she is the Ginsu's holder of the set. In the last 4 cost, Ziggs, who's a cyber boss strategist. When he casts, he throws a big boom! And when he's the battle boss, it hits the entire board and he deals more damage. Finally, we have the 5 cost. 5 cost, 5 cost, 5 cost, 5 cost. Aurora is an Anima Squad Dynamo, and when she casts, she TPs, fires a huge beam, then she swaps places with the unit on your leftmost bench slot. When she's on your bench, she can't take damage, and when the unit she summons dies, she comes back and she can't TP back to the bench. Garen, I think his ability is the lamest out of all the 5 costs, but his trait is really cool. His ability, he just gains a shield and throws a Beyblade. If the Beyblade only hits 2 units, he gains mana. But his trait, God of the Net, is so cool. It works similarly to Rumble, but instead of upgrading himself, he opens up a shop with 3 traits and you can permanently give a trait to one of your units. This doesn't work like an emblem, so you don't get +1 to your trait, but let's say you have 4 Dynamo active and you get a Dynamo mod. Then if you give Dynamo to your Garen, he now has 4 Dynamo. Kabuko is a Cyber Boss Bruiser, and his ability also has so much text. For his passive, his attacks deal bonus magic damage, and at 35% HP, he gains a Giga Shield, he gains attack speed, Omnivamp, and 100 mana. On cast, he gains durability, then picks up a nearby enemy, knocking up everybody within 1 hex, then he slams down, dealing damage and a percentage of that target's maximum HP. And if he's the Cyber Boss, he knocks everybody up within 2 hexes. Renekton is a Divinicore Bastion Overlord, and Overlord, his unique trait, functions a lot like Hunger for Power. At the start of every turn, he takes a bite of the unit behind him, stealing a percentage of their HP and their AD. As for his ability, he can only cast 2 times every fight. On his first cast, he deals damage, applies anti-heal around him, and he also gains HP, and he becomes frenzied, and all his attacks now hit twice, and he dashes. And on his second cast, all his attacks, instead of hitting 2 times, hit 3 times. Samira is a Street Demon amp unit. She dashes in, becomes a tornado, and she fires more bullets the more amp you have. And when the tornado is done, she dashes back to safety and deals damage. Urgot is a Boombot Executioner, and he's the 5 cost econ unit of the set. On cast, he gains an attack speed steroid, and your attacks also fire rockets that deal more damage. Once a cast, you'll be able to pull in an enemy when they hit 15% HP, and when you grind up that enemy, you can farm items and gold. Viego is a Golden Ox techie, and his unique trait is Soul Killer. Soul Killer is pretty cool. You gain a hologram copy of the highest cost enemy Viego gets a takedown on. The hologram always has the same amount of HP and deals the same amount of damage, both of which scale with Viego's star level, and the hologram will also always have a recommended item equipped. For his passive, when units die, he heals, and when he casts, he jumps into the largest clump of enemies, dealing damage and shreds them. And the last 5 cost of the set, and probably the most broken 5 cost of the set, Zac. Virus makes blobs show up in your shop, and when you click them, your Zac gains HP and AP. Oh, and the blobs don't take up a unit slot. Whenever you buy the blob, the unit will show up behind them. His passive is at 10% health. He'll split into 2 copies with 50% of his maximum HP, so he pretty much has 200% max health. And when he casts, he bounces on 3 enemies. Each cast does a ton of damage, stuns, and also heals Zac. So I'm pretty sure this unit is going to be broken the entire set. Onto the traits, I'm not going over these alphabetically. Instead, I group them into traits that you're often going to be playing together. First, we got the AMP trait. I talked about this a bit before, but basically AMP units gain HP and their abilities upgrade for each AMP unit you play. Nidalee's ability hits more units, Nefiri summons more alphas, Yuumi gains more mana, Annie's fireball spreads into more pieces, and Samira fires more shots. Nitro's the summon trait. You summon a dinosaur that you feed at the start of every turn. The amount you feed scales off your Nitro unit's star levels, and at 200 chrome, your guy becomes a dinosaur. At 3 Nitro, your robot heals and does damage to like the 3 closest units, and at 4 Nitro, he fires a huge laser. Bastion's the same trait it's been for like the last 10 sets. Your team gains armor and MR, and Bastions gain more. If you're ever playing a comp that has 1 Bastion unit in it, you're often going to play a second one on your level, or you're going to splash it in because 10 armor and MR is a lot of effective HP. Anima Squad is a pretty cool trait. Your units gain armor, MR, and damage amp, and at every breakpoint you choose weapons and they do damage depending on what weapons you choose. I don't know what all the weapons do, but in my experience, you just choose between a weapon that does physical damage and a weapon that does magic damage. When you're deciding what weapon to pick, just take a look at who you're going to carry and pick a weapon that matches that damage type. So if you're playing Vayne or Xayah carry, you're going to pick the weapons that do physical damage, and if you're carrying Yuumi or Aurora, you're gonna pick the weapons that do magic damage. Since Anima Squad's main carry is Zaya, you're always gonna be playing a marksman to buffer, and what marksman does is you gain AD, and after 8 seconds, it's increased by 100%. Likewise, Anima Squad's main tank is Leona, so you're always gonna be playing Vanguard. At the start of combat and at 50% HP, you gain a shield, and your Vanguards gain 10% durability when they're shielded. Boombots is very similar to Automata from last set. You basically do damage every 500 damage you do. Cyber Boss, your strongest Cyber Boss upgrades for more HP, AP, and their ability hits more people. If you play 4 Cyber, everybody on your team becomes a Cyber Boss, and your strongest Cyber Boss gains even more HP and AP. Since Ziggs is your main carry, you want him to do as much damage as possible, so you're often going to be playing Vertical Strategist. At the start of combat, allies in the back 2 rows gain damage amp, allies in the front gain durability, and your strategists gain triple the amount. Cypher's the cash out trait of the set. You gain intel by losing combats, which is increased on a loss streak, and you gain a little bit of intel if you kill enemies. But unlike other cash out traits, you can only cash out on certain rounds, being 3-3, 3-7, 4-3, and 4-7. And after you cash out, that's it. You can't cash out again. Instead, your Cypher units gain AD and AP. When you play Cypher, there's 2 routes you can take, either Draven or Zed. In the playtest, I only played Cypher with Draven, so I'm going to be talking about Rapid Fire. Your team gains 10% attack speed, and Rapid Fire units basically have a Ginsu's that can only stack up to 10 times. Divinicore is a really similar trait to Guild back in a previous set. I don't really remember which one it was. Basically, your units give stats to your entire team, and Divinicore units gain more. So for example, if you're playing a Morgana on your board, and that's the only Divinicore unit you're playing, your entire team is going to get 9% AP, and your Morgana is going to get 18% AP. If you decide to play a Rost on your board, your entire team still gets the 9% AP from Morgana. They'll also get 6 armor and MR from Rost. The only thing that's going to change is how much your Divinicore units are going to benefit. So now, instead of Morgana providing 18% to all guild units, she's now going to provide 18.9% AP to all units. And Rost isn't going to only provide 12 armor and MR, he's now going to provide 12.6 armor and MR to all Divinicore units. If you play Vertical Divinicore, Vex seems to be the main carry, and she's an Executioner. Executioner is a lot like Ambushers from last set. Your abilities can crit and you do more crit damage, but the lower HP your target gets, the higher your crit chance goes. Exotech is a trait that gives you items that only Exotech units can equip. These items are different every game, and they're different for every player. Every Exotech item your unit equips gives them bonus HP and attack speed that scales with how many Exotech units you're playing. Hollow is an item that gives you mana after you crit, and after casting an ability, you gain more crit for 5 seconds. Repulsor Lantern gives you a ton of HP, and every 3 seconds, you deal a percentage of your max HP as magic damage to all units around you. Corrupted Chassis makes all shields more effective on you, and every few seconds, you deal 12% of your max HP damage to your current target, and you gain it as a shield. Pulse Stabilizer executes enemies below 12 HP and makes your abilities able to crit. Hyper Fangs makes it so when you damage an enemy, you store some of that damage dealt, and after 4 seconds, you deal that amount of stored damage to the target and the nearest enemy. Cyber Coil is a tank item. Your abilities and attacks mark enemies, and you heal for 18% of that damage dealt to marked enemies. Flux Capacitor makes your attacks store charge, and at 4 charges, your next attack deals a percentage of their max HP and reduces their armor by 10. For Exotech, you're probably just going to carry whatever unit benefits the most from your first Exotech item. So if at 3 Exotech you get Flux Capacitor, you probably want to play towards Zeri, and if your first Exotech item is Hyper Fangs, you might want to play Jhin or Varus. And since Mordekaiser is a bruiser unit, it's really easy to just splash that trait and your entire team gains 100 HP and your bruisers gain more. Golden Ox is a very unique trait. All Golden Ox units gain damage amp, and whenever they kill an enemy, they can drop gold. The amount of damage amp Golden Ox gives you increases if you spend enough gold in a turn. So if you spend 8 gold on rerolls or XP in a single turn, you permanently increase their damage amp, and the gold required for the next bonus will increase. So it goes from 8 to 12, then 16, then 20, and so on and so forth. And rerolls count as 4 gold and not 2, so it's actually pretty easy to hit the earlier breakpoints. Slayer is a very simple trait. You gain 80 in Omnivamp, and if you overheal, you heal the lowest health Slayer for 50% of the excess. Street Demon is very similar to KDA from set 10. Hexes become painted, and they grant every unit HP, AP, and AD. There are certain hexes that grant 50% more, and if Street Demons stand on those hexes, they double all the bonuses. Bran seems to be the default level 8 carry for this comp, and he's a techie, which is pretty much the mage of this set. Techies gain AP, and when enemies are hit by their abilities, they do less damage for a few seconds. And for our last 2 traits, first we got Syndicate, which gives you an item that lets you upgrade a Syndicate champion's ability. When Shaco's the Kingpin, it allows him to teleport to the lowest held enemy. When Darius is the Kingpin, his ability doubles in range. Twisted Fate fires a colored card. Braum deals more damage and is tankier, and Twisted Fate's ult lasts for more waves. Speaking of Misfortune, she has the one trait we haven't talked about yet, Dynamo. Every 3 seconds, your team gains mana, and Dynamos gain 100% more.